Give me liberty and give me Annette.
Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where I talk about the Constitution, history, politics, pretty much anything else I want to talk about. This podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio maybe, YouTube for sure.
All reputable outlets.
Yes, and some of the disreputable ones. And you can find the video on YouTube /Annette Talks if you want to see what we look like, because we're both really attractive, so you might want to check us out.
Well, Annette is.
As you can see today and here, I have a guest, Mr. D.K. Williams.
I'm back, thank you.
Yes, my Constitution / Supreme Court expert and favorite guest.
Oh, stop.
And for now, we'll see if we can do better ones.
That's exactly.
You never know. Right. All right. Well, also, you can find it on AnnetteTalks.com. I don't know if I said that or not.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. Anyway, go to AnnetteTalks.com.
Yes.
Future home of some really cool Liberty t-shirts that I am designing right now. They're way cool, and there's at least one that's going to drive the left crazy.
All right.
I'll leave it at that. All right, and so DK,
yes,
you are, as I mentioned, Constitution / Supreme Court expert.
Well, I read it and read the cases and stuff like that. Yeah,
so that's more than 99.9% of the rest.
I like to read and discuss them, and I have a podcast where I talk about Supreme Court cases or otherwise pertinent legal decisions that are in the news, and we're going to talk about one here in a moment. But check me out on The Law with DK Williams is the name of the podcast. Go to Twitter at TheLawDKW, and you'll get from there. I'll let you know when a new podcast is out. And I'm with Speakeasy Ideas. So if you go to speakeasyideas.com/thelaw, you'll find my podcast there. And on Facebook, on Facebook, facebook.com/thelaw with DK Williams. So check all that out, and you'll never miss anything important.
Yeah, get it right, because I'm not editing this video at all. He's
no.
on Facebook. You want to follow him on Facebook. He posts occasionally.
Well, that's my personal page. I do way too much in that. But The Law, I just try to keep that focus on legal issues of the day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But you're missing out.
Ones.
You're missing out if you don't go on the personal page. Although I think you're at 5,000 friends now.
No, I'm not. I've lost like 12 recently.
Oh,
so I've got spots. I'm down at 4,988. Something
so
like
there's room. If you get in good with him,
yeah.
you might get
DK Williams, yeah.
All right. So, as we mentioned, we're going to cover one of the Supreme Court cases that's... Okay, first of all,
yes.
For those of us that are not familiar with the Supreme Court, and it's, what do you call it? It's, I don't want to say season, but...
It's terms.
Terms, thank you.
Right.
So how does that work? How often do they sit and listen to cases?
They do it, they call it terms. They take a summer break usually. They start in October of whatever, Right now, even though it's 2020, they're in the October 2019 term, because that's when they started. So, what is that, kind of like football season? I don't know. And so that's when they start hearing arguments. And when they hear arguments, usually a month or two, sometimes later than that, they'll issue written opinions after they hear the arguments. And of course, they've already all been briefed before the arguments. So right now they're hearing arguments. And for the first time in history, they have live streamed some arguments because of this whole...
Wow.
This nonsense that's going on. Because normally they'll have arguments in the Supreme Court building, and there's a limited number of seats. People can come in and listen, right? And they record those, but they don't release them until Friday of that week. So if there's an argument on Wednesday, if you're there, you can hear it. But that's a very, very limited number of people. Then on Friday, they release the audio. So you can listen to it a couple days later. They've never had live streaming ever, or live access ever, until this term, because they shut down, because they're not meeting at the Supreme Court. You got a bunch of old people, right?
Oh, they're not? Where are they at?
They're at their homes or offices, or wherever. They can be anywhere.
So they're doing this all separately?
They are doing it by conference call. It's not Zoom, because there's not cameras on them. It's just audio. It's really a conference call.
So they could be in their robes.
Yeah, no, they're probably not in their robes. They're probably.
I was thinking bathrobes.
Yeah, they can be in their bathrobe. Yeah, absolutely.
They're like,
and
we
most
don't
of
have
them,
to wear the robe.
matter of fact, none of them. I want that image. None of them. But so yeah, it's a conference call, and since they couldn't have any people there live because they're not there live, they are live streaming the arguments for the first time. And so I listened to. We're going to talk about these electoral college cases. That argument was on Wednesday. And I listened to it on live stream. Court TV actually had them, was broadcasting them live with just pictures of people, right? Like, somebody talked, they just put the picture up because you couldn't really see them. And
it'd be funny if they put like a potato.
they take like an hour and a half, usually, I think, because they're like 45 minutes aside, something like that. It's pretty close to it. And usually, or historically, a lawyer will start talking. And if one of the justices has a question, they can interrupt you in the first 5 seconds if they wanted to. But not for this because they can't see each other.
Right.
So now they've got a rule where they're allowing the lawyer to speak for, I think it's 2 minutes before any questions will happen. And then if there's questions, they can start asking him questions.
So this, if you can't watch any sports right now, this is a good substitute.
That and Top Chef. They have those. That's a good competition. And so it's and all the historical ones are available too. If you want to listen to something historical, since they've been recording it, right? Because Plessy v. Ferguson wasn't recorded because that was before they had the technology to do it. But since they've had the technology to do it, there's several places you can go to hear them. I like to go to oyez.com, which is some people say oyez. It's like when the clerk introduces oyez, now presiding the Honorable United States Supreme Court or whatever.
What does that mean anyway?
It's just like, hey, you guys, hey, everybody.
I wonder where that came from. I've always wondered that.
That's from way back in Britain, United Kingdom history, when they wore powdered wigs and all that.
Right.
It's just, from tradition that's still hanging on.
Interesting.
They still wear wigs. They don't wear wigs. They wear robes, but they got rid of the wigs. They still wear the robes, though. You can listen to any of those you want. And right now, they don't have any more scheduled be live streamed. They did, I think, 10 of them over the past couple of weeks. And I think that there's no reason they shouldn't continue to do this.
Yeah,
right.
why not?
And as far as I'm concerned, they should be videoed as well.
Yeah,
they should
I don't
be
know why
live
they
streamed.
can't.
Right.
Why isn't Ginsburg in the hospital, or she was?
No, she's out. She's out. She's out now.
I could just see her in the hospital bed.
Right.
Arguing.
Well, if they're having it in the Supreme Court building, they should be live streamed. My vision of this is you've got C-SPAN 1 for Congress or House of Representatives, you got C-SPAN 2 for the Senate. There should be a C-SPAN 3 for the Supreme Court.
Why not?
And then when they're not doing stuff, you could show because the Court of Appeals and district courts go all year long. So when the U.S. Supreme Court's not doing something, they can show stuff from whatever they thought was cool from those.
That would be fun.
There's no reason not to do that. The reason they don't is because tradition. And the people in the Supreme Court right now are like, no, I don't want to do that. That would violate the decorum of the office or whatever. It's
That's
nonsense.
just silly. They really need to get past that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
don't they know that we're all on Zoom like all the time?
Yeah.
now?
Hopefully that will be a thing.
Yeah. Our kids, our kids are homeschooling and they're on Zoom. I have to be really careful walking around the house.
You might need a backdrop, right? You don't want to be.
I have to make sure I'm fully clothed, my hair is not terrible, because you never know when you're going to walk by someone's room.
That's right.
And they're sitting there with their little laptop with the camera on.
Yep.
Gotta
be aware. Gotta be aware.
Yeah. All right, so we've digressed long enough. What cases are we talking about?
All right, so the U.S. Supreme Court just heard argument in 2 cases involving the same issue, it is the same issue, different facts, about the Electoral College. If you recall, even when Trump won in 2016, he won the Electoral College, but he didn't win what some people call the popular vote. There's no such thing as a national popular vote. There's not. What they do is they take the popular votes of states and add them together, and they call that a national popular vote. But they're adding them all together. Nobody votes nationally. You vote at the state level for the United States president. And you're not voting directly for the president. You're voting for electors to vote for the president. Some people say, how stupid is that? Why are we doing that?
Yeah, why is that anyway, in a nutshell?
Historically, when the Constitution, and I'm glad you provided a copy right here.
Every day when my kids and I have dinner, I quiz them on this.
That's good. And you've got the Constitution game, too.
Yes, I do.
Well, I've got that, too. So it's a good game to have.
Because if your kids are homeschooled right now,
learn this.
I've given up on almost everything. But every night at dinner, I quiz them on this because I figure if nothing else comes out of this whole thing, my kids are going to have a working knowledge of at least the first 3 articles and the Bill of Rights.
Good. Very good. And so when they were hammering this whole thing out back in the late 1700s, one of the things they had to decide was how are we going to elect a president? And they were debating all kinds of things. They discussed a national popular vote. Mm-hmm. They discussed each state getting 1 vote. Mm-hmm. They discussed Congress selecting the president. All these things were discussed, and they dismissed those ideas for a lot of different reasons. And what they came up with was the Electoral College. And part of the idea was, because back then, you might have the people in South Carolina that are voting for president, and there might be a candidate from New York or Massachusetts, and they know nothing about this guy, right? 'Cause times are completely different. Ease of access of information wasn't as easy as it is now, right? So the idea was, okay, so the people in South Carolina might not know anything about the candidate from New York, but they'll know people in South Carolina who are involved with the national government, and they will know the guy from New York and the guy from Massachusetts and the guy from North Carolina. They'll know these people. So people would vote for people that they know to vote for president.
Right.
That's why they
So
did
it's
it.
basically a representative in a way.
Yeah.
Someone that represents them,
Right.
voting for someone that they might not know very well.
That is correct. And you can say that, well, that's stupid. We don't need to do that anymore. I get it. That's a legit argument. But that's what's in the
other
Constitution.
Arguments, but we won't.
Yeah.
Right now.
But it's in the Constitution. And if you think it's a bad idea, it's been amended multiple times, and there's an amendment process.
Right.
But that is how it was set up, and that is still how it's written. Now, we have pretty much ignored that for the past, 100 years or more, 150 years. And now states have, almost, not all of them, most states have got a law that says the electors must vote for whoever wins the state popular vote.
Right.
So in Colorado, for example, in 2016, Hillary Clinton won Colorado. And so those electors, by Colorado statute, were required to vote for Hillary, all 9 of Colorado's. And you get your electoral college votes are based on the number of senators you have, and everybody gets 2, Wyoming gets 2, California gets 2, and the number of representatives you have, which is based on your population. So Carolina has 7 U.S. representatives, members to the House of Representatives, and 2 senators. So we have 9 electoral college votes. And since Hillary won the statewide vote in Colorado, all 9 of those electors were required by Colorado law to vote for her. Well, a couple didn't want to do that. And these were all Democratic electors. That's part of the process.
Remind me again why they didn't want to do it. Wasn't there some kind of a scheme?
Yeah. There was this nascent idea that didn't really get too much traction. But if you recall, so many people, especially Democrats, Hillary supporters, were aghast that she lost, right? That was like, oh, I can't believe this happened. And there are some Republicans who are like, Trump's not my favorite guy, to put it, put it one way. And so the idea was, hey, we're electors. We get to vote for this. And the Democratic electors in Colorado said, okay, we know Hillary lost. That sucks. Yeah, that's their thought. But we can't let Trump become president. So we as Democratic electors will vote for somebody else, somebody else. And if we can get enough Republican electors that don't want to vote for Trump, we'll get some other Republican. That'll be our compromise. We lost. It's not going to be a Democrat. But if we can get some other electors that are Republican electors to vote for somebody else, if we can get enough people to do that, and it's like 8, they needed like 80. That's not exactly right, but they needed a substantial number.
That's a lot.
If they needed 5, that'd be something else. But they needed like 80.
Yeah, they didn't come anywhere near enough,
No,
did they?
no, they didn't get enough. But so that was the idea. And they're like, if we get people to vote for John Kasich, who was the Republican governor of Ohio at the time, or Ron Paul, just because he's a Republican, and Colin Powell got some votes, people like that. And the idea is if Trump doesn't get the majority needed of the Electoral College votes, then it goes to Congress, and then it's, something else can happen.
Right.
So if you voted for Colin Powell or for Ron Paul or John Kasich, it doesn't mean that person has got any legitimate chance of becoming president. It's just a vote that doesn't go to Trump.
Right.
And then it goes to Congress, and they can do whatever they want.
So
and that was the idea.
All right. So then were there 2 in Colorado you said that did this?
3.
3. Okay. And so we call those faithless electors because they're not.
But you know what I say? Faithless is so judgmental. I think we should call them rogue electors.
There you go. Yeah, I think you just like that word.
I do like rogue electors. Yeah.
It is a pretty good word. All right, so rogue electors.
Right.
But in the court, they call them faithless, or these
commonly referred to as faithless electors.
Right.
Although watching the Court TV broadcast of the arguments on yesterday by the time we're recording this,
right.
the court TV guy, like in between breaks, said rogue elector.
Oh, yeah?
And I'm like, he's clearly
There you
listening
go.
to my podcast.
I'm sure that's
where
the
it comes
case.
from. Yeah, exactly.
That's
Exactly.
You should listen to his podcast. He makes the law fun.
I try to make it understandable because it's not as hard, or people make it harder than it should be. I mean, there's some esoteric concepts like standing and jurisdiction and all this type of things. I try to avoid those and just focus on the meat of the stuff that's entertaining.
Right.
Those things are important, but they're not as interesting. So I try to focus on the interesting things.
Well, we appreciate that.
And explain them.
Even lawyers
the best
like
I
me,
can.
like I don't really want to get into all that minutia. I mean, it's important.
Yeah,
but
you can get
we
into the
just-
weeds.
Like we want to
Right.
know what the case is about and what happened.
And I try to present both sides. I mean, my viewpoint is clear, but I try to explain both sides. I quote from the Supreme Court, and I always put a link to the actual case. Because don't listen to me, don't listen to people on CNN or Fox or whatever. If you want to understand the case, it's easy to
You
read
go
it.
to the source.
It's easy to read it. So I put a link to the actual case in all of my show notes.
And
for every
Supreme
single
Court
page.
cases are not as bad to read as some of the other lower. Sometimes you get judges that cannot write. Those cases are terrible. But Supreme Court's cases are not bad.
Relatively
So,
speaking. It's not like reading Stephen King.
No.
So
Well, there's
I
less
think
curse words.
yes, there is.
All right, so we've got the case, and obviously
Yeah.
the state has a problem with the faithless / rogue electors
Right.
doing their own thing,
Right.
contrary to the statute.
Right.
And the same thing in Washington.
Right. So in Colorado, just use that for example right now, there was 3 electors that were going to vote for somebody other than Hillary because they were trying not to let Trump win.
Who did they
If that
vote for?
follows. Well, 2 of them eventually did what they were told. One of them did not.
Okay, that was the one
that's
you
Michael
interviewed him,
Baca,
right?
Michael Baca, who's I interviewed him in episode 60 of the Law. I think it's up to like 79 at this point, but in episode 60 of the Law, I interviewed Michael Baca because previously I had done the 10th Circuit decision regarding his case where he won. So he won at the 10th Circuit, saying that he could vote for however he wanted to. I'll back up a little bit more. So Baca said, "No, I'm not going to do what you're telling me to do." Yes, the state statute says I have to vote for Hillary, and they get you like a piece of paper where who do you vote for? It says Hillary.
So you have to write in someone else.
Well, he did. He crossed it out and wrote in John Kasich. Who he wrote in isn't really important. It's just that he didn't vote for Hillary.
I'm just curious. I just like the idea of crossing that out. And
Yeah, right. I mean, it's like an election in North Korea, right?
Right.
Who are you going to vote for? Well, I guess
Dear
this
leader,
person.
right, dear leader.
But he didn't do that. And the Colorado Secretary of State at the time was Wayne Williams, who ironically is a Republican, and he wasn't going to count this Republican vote because that's Colorado statute said you can't do that.
You have to be. Well, yeah, you don't have much choice.
Right. And so he threatened Baca, saying we're going to have the Attorney General prosecute you for fraud and all this other type of stuff. But he insisted on voting for Kasich, not voting for Hillary. That's the important part. And what Wayne Williams did, the Colorado Secretary of State at the time, just didn't count his vote. And so we're replacing you pursuant to Colorado law. They got somebody else to come in and do what they were told to do.
Check the box.
Right. So Baca filed a federal lawsuit. He lost at the district court level, along with the other 2 who changed their mind and did what they're supposed to do anyway. Baca went to the 10th Circuit, which is the Federal Court of Appeals out of Colorado, where you go next. And he won there in a 2-1 decision. So I covered that one in episode 48. Sorry, episode 48. And then, roughly the same time, similar thing was going on in Washington State. Because there they did have 3 electors who, again, Hillary won in Washington. So they're all required by state law to vote for Hillary. 3 of them were like, no, we're going to try to do this thing where we can try to get, if we do this, we're going to try to get Republicans to do it.
Right.
And so Trump won't win the Electoral College. So 3 of them voted, I think 2 of them voted for Colin Powell, again, it doesn't matter who, and one of them voted for some American Indian protester at the pipeline that was going on. Anyway,
Activist.
Right. So that was episode 49. We did that case. And that case was filed in Washington State Court. So the 3 electors there who had their votes counted, so that's different from Colorado. They had their votes counted, but the Washington State legislature, the statute, said that if you don't do what you're told to do, you don't vote for who wins the statewide election, we're going to fine you $1,000. So their votes were counted.
But they were fined.
They were fined. And so they're like, you can't do that to us. So Baca and the 3 from Washington all had the same argument. They're like, you can't punish me. You can't tell me I can't do this. You can't kick me off because the U.S. Constitution says we are electors, and if you get to vote, that's up to us.
Well, you know what? It just occurs to me. It says, like, why would we even continue to have electors if we're going to require them to just?
Right.
I mean, we could just take a rubber stamp and go.
Yep, exactly.
You know, why have electors if we're not going to allow them to make decisions?
Yep. No,
and like you
right.
mentioned, if we don't like that, then we need to amend the Constitution.
Correct. That's my view on it. Yeah.
That's what it just. I mean, just logic just says that. Like, why would we
Right.
have them if all you're going to do is check a box?
Yeah.
All you're going to do is check a box.
It becomes a mere formality, which is what it has become during the past 100 years or whatever.
It is a mere formality.
Yes.
So
and let me read this part because so I did in my podcast episode 48 on Michael Baca from Colorado, episode 49 on the Washington State Supreme Court, which ruled against the electors, the faithless rogue electors. So we got two conflicting decisions now. A federal appeals court says electors have the constitutional right, authority, to vote for however they want. That's the whole point of this. The Washington State Supreme Court said, no, they don't. They have to do what they're told. All right.
So that's a good place that's a good case for the Supreme Court to take, both of them, because when you have two conflicting
things,
decisions.
Because you've got two different ways of counting, basically. One way you count, the electors can vote whoever they want to vote for. The other way you count is they have to vote for who they're told to vote for. And if who they're told to vote for isn't who they vote for, you've got different votes.
Right.
And so what could happen, if this wasn't resolved, you've got two different sources. One court saying, count it this way. Another court saying, no, count it this way. And if we got to an election in 2020, not that long from now,
right,
and this hasn't been resolved, and right now it hasn't been resolved yet, but the U.S. Supreme Court is going to make a ruling.
And so, let's say it doesn't get resolved.
Right.
By the time the election comes around.
Right.
This is your idea for a novel, right?
Right. Yeah, our short story. Anyway.
So let's hear it. Let's hear the potential scenario.
So if the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't decide, let's say they decided not to hear these cases, but they did.
Right.
But if they hadn't, or maybe something happens and they don't make a decision before November of 2020, and let's say it's super close. Let's say one candidate wins the Electoral College by 3 votes. All right? That's really close. But we've got 5 electors that say, oh, I'm not going to vote for the way the state legislature mandates I vote, because according to the 10th Circuit and the Constitution, is their argument, I have discretion. I don't have to vote the way the state legislature tells me to vote. So these 5 votes aren't for candidate A. They're really for candidate B, and therefore he wins. But candidate A is going like, no, you can't do that. So, no, those votes are my vote. So now you've got a legal dispute as to who gets those votes and who is going to be the president of the United States of America, right? And so you could really have kind of a banana republic situation here, where 2 people have different legal but legitimate arguments to be the president of the United States. And if let's say the U.S. Supreme Court didn't do these cases, hasn't heard arguments on them, and now it becomes an issue. Oh, can you imagine that? If you remember Bush versus Gore, when that issue happened down in Florida, and that was a major controversy because the U.S. Supreme Court made a ruling there, and some people were like, oh man, the U.S. Supreme Court just stole the election or whatever.
Right.
That was bad. Can you imagine what would happen in this case? It would be even worse.
Right.
So it is important for the U.S. Supreme Court to make a decision one way or the other, so we know how to count the votes.
Yes.
Because if there's a dispute as to how to count them, there could be a dispute as to who won.
Right.
All right. And so, but think about this, because in this case that's pending now, there's actually 2 cases. It's the Baca case out of Colorado, and it's the case out of Washington. So they heard arguments on both of those yesterday. In the Baca case, Justice Sotomayor recused herself.
Oh, because she's friends with Baca?
Polly Baca. There's 2 Bacas out of Colorado. They're not related.
Oh.
Michael Baca is the guy who refused to vote for Hillary. Polly Baca was also an elector who didn't want to vote for Hillary, but she eventually did. So
there's 2 Bacas that are electors?
That are unrelated.
That's confusing.
Right. So, but Justice Sotomayor knows Polly Baca, and she was one of the parties out of Colorado, so she recused herself on that one. So, how many justices do we have deciding that case?
We have 8, so...
We have 8.
That could be a problem.
It could be...
Hey, so if it was a 4-4...
Exactly.
We could still have your scenario.
Right. We could still have the scenario. But I don't think that'll happen.
What do you think's going to
Because
happen?
even if it happens in Baca, Sotomayor did not recuse herself in the Washington case.
Right.
So I think that one would, they would be able to rely on that
they're
one.
going to
for the
rule on
5-4.
both of those
Right.
cases, but they would need to do the same ruling pretty much, wouldn't they? Because it's the same issue.
Probably. I mean, they're different facts. They could issue two separate opinions. Sometimes they do that.
Seems like they should just merge the two.
Right. Although the facts are different, and that might make a difference in the holdings, but we shall see.
So you might have
on that.
5-4 on one and potentially 4-4 on the other.
Or, I mean, sometimes it will happen. There's some famous Supreme Court cases where there's not a majority. It could be a 4-person opinion and a 4-person opinion, and then the 9th guy writes his own thing.
Right.
That's happened. Or some other combination, 4-3-2, whatever. That's happened. It's not usual, but it happens. So if that could conceivably happen here too.
Right.
Again, we're getting kind of far-fetched, but it's within the realm of possibility this could happen.
So just from what you've heard so far, what would you guess is going to happen?
I think the justices are gonna say the electors have to do what they're told.
By the state.
Yeah.
To avoid...
And a couple of justices use the word chaos in their arguments.
Yeah,
I think that's a little strong, but this is what I call this. And this is my own thing as far as I know. I call this the constitutional erosion doctrine. So it's like, okay, yeah, the Constitution says that you guys have your own discretion, but we've eroded that over the past 150 years. Therefore, even though we haven't changed this, there's been no actual amendment to this.
Right.
It's like the Grand Canyon. You leave it alone long enough, it just changes, right? Now, that's not a legitimate reason to do it, in my opinion. And they're not going to call it that. But that is, in my view, the best description of it. The erosion doctrine. We've been doing it this way for so long. We're used to doing it this way. And even though it's wrong, it's the way it is now. So that's what I think the majority will do. Could be completely wrong.
Yeah, and it's just crazy because the whole point... The Supreme Court is supposed to decide the constitutionality of these cases that come up before them, not, what's best for the country or what's best in the situation.
Yeah, they're not supposed to do that.
They're trying to avoid chaos, they say, but that's not their job. That's not their mandate.
Right. I wish I could remember who it was, but one of the justices said, our job is to do what the Constitution says regardless of the outcome.
Right.
So, they
I
know
remember
that.
reading that somewhere too, and I can't remember.
Was it Alito? I'm not sure.
It was someone
Or Breyer,
surprising
maybe.
to me.
Was it Breyer? Anyway, let me read you this short quote. This is from the last Supreme Court case that dealt with the Electoral College. It was Ray versus Blair, and I covered this one in episode 50. So you got 48, 49, 50. I was on a
I
streak.
don't know how you remember all your episode numbers.
I wrote
I was going to say, I don't remember.
So that's, I was on a streak there. And then 10 episodes later, in episode 60, I got the interview with Michael Baca, who's a Colorado.
So people, if you want to go back and listen to that.
Yeah, check them out. So Ray versus Blair was a U.S. Supreme Court case from 1952.
Wow.
It dealt with electors, but not this specific issue. But since it dealt with electors, some of the language is important. And here's a great line.
Because they're supposed to look at precedent, so this could have some bearing on what
I mean, this is a dissent, so...
okay.
But
I always like the dissents.
Sometimes they're more fun to read.
Yeah.
Justice Jackson wrote in the dissent in this Ray versus Blair case, and I don't think most people would disagree with this. He says, no one faithful to our history can deny that the plan originally contemplated what is implicit in its text, visual aid, in its text, that electors would be free agents to exercise an independent and nonpartisan judgment as to the men best qualified for the nation's highest offices. And I think that's correct. The Federalist Papers talk about it. The whole thing was we're going to elect people to make this decision, not to be rubber stamps for the popular election.
Yeah, because why else?
They rejected the popular vote.
Why else do we have them? You're right.
They specifically rejected the popular vote.
Why not just have a popular vote?
Right. And maybe that's a great idea. But again, what's a great idea and what's constitutional are different things. And if you want to change the Constitution, it's been done and it can be done again. It's not supposed to be done by erosion and it's not supposed to be done by the courts. But that's where we are. And to me, I don't think it would be chaos because if you knew, okay, I'm voting for electors. I'm voting for people to decide the presidential election. you're going to care about who it is.
Yeah.
We just, for so long, we haven't cared because it has been a rubber stamp.
I think it would be really cool if they rule in the way they're supposed to rule, that electors actually
In favor
matter.
of Michael Baca, right.
Yeah. And then that electors would take on more importance and they had to like campaign.
Yeah, they would have to.
That would be cool.
They would have to.
I like
exactly.
that.
And I think most of them would probably say, I will vote for whoever wins the whoever wins the popular vote. A lot of them would say that, and you can vote for that person.
Right.
Some would say, you vote for me, I'm voting for Trump, or I'm going to vote for Biden, and you can vote for that person. Mm-hmm. But you would know what they're going to do. The next issue becomes is, what if you vote for somebody who says, I'm going to vote for Trump, and then they don't? Well, that's what politics is.
Yeah, it is.
My favorite example of that is the original Bush said no new taxes. Now read my lips, no new taxes. He pledged that.
Yeah.
That was his pledge. He went back on that pledge.
Yes.
He suffered politically for it. He was a one-term president. That was one reason anyway.
Right.
So if people go back on their pledges, that hurts them politically and who knows however else.
Yeah.
But that's the recourse. That's how politics works. If somebody lies, you don't vote for him again. And that might suck.
Yeah.
But that's how it is.
It is.
So that's my take on that. And we shall see. And as soon as they make a decision, probably in the next couple of months, we'll all have to
We'll come revisit that.
figure it out. Yeah.
So, just as a side note,
Yes.
it's hard to get around the whole stuff that's going on, stay-at-home orders and everything.
Yeah.
And so, just yesterday?
Yep, in Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin?
Yep.
Okay, so the state Supreme Court said that the stay-at-home order was unconstitutional.
Correct.
And overturned it.
Correct.
So there is a potential that could go to the Supreme Court.
You know what? I don't think that one will, because I just skimmed it and actually linked to it. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll get this stuff. I linked to the actual case. The case is 161 pages.
Oh my gosh.
All right?
Wow.
But because there's the majority opinion, and they have 7 Supreme Court justices in Wisconsin, and it was a 4-3 decision. So you had the 4-justice majority opinion. 2 of them wrote a concurrence as well, and then there were several. The 3 who dissented wrote a whole bunch as well. Mm-hmm. But the majority decision opinion is 31 pages. And it looks to me like, from skimming it, and I haven't read it in depth. It came out yesterday, like I said, it's long. But I plan on it. That is based on a Wisconsin statute. And because the governor's order wasn't as broad, they didn't overturn the governor's order. They overturned some cabinet levels order, Department of Health or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not that familiar with the Wisconsin politics or the structure of their government, but it was some other official in the Department of Health or whatever they called it who issued these more stringent stay-at-home orders. That's what was overturned. And one of the issues was, did that person in the government have the authority to do it according to Wisconsin law? So if it's completely a Wisconsin statutory issue, U.S. Supreme Court's not going to.
It wasn't. So they didn't. It wasn't a constitutional. It wasn't on a constitutional basis that it was.
They discussed it, but I don't know if that was enough for the basis. If they can limit the decision to the statute, then the U.S. Supreme Court won't.
It's not
care.
a federal.
Right.
It's not a federal case.
Right. But again, yeah.
That's too bad, because I was kind of hoping if that happened, and then maybe another state tried this, and maybe the Supreme Court said no, it is constitutional, so upheld it. Then we could have something that would get to the Supreme Court, because it's really shocking to me that hasn't happened yet. This stuff that's going on is crazy.
Yeah.
Like I hope we see a lot of cases. Like I talked to a lawyer the other day who's talking about taking a case for a bunch of chiropractors to sue the state because they're basically losing their businesses because they're shut.
There's so much of it. And now, even the Atlantic, which is a more progressive magazine, has written 2 articles that I've seen, there may be more, about how the shutdown is not a good idea. So when the Atlantic starts to get it, and when the World Health Organization, not exactly a limited government organization, starts saying that the lockdowns might have really bad consequences that we have to consider. And today I cited a report from UNICEF, a UN organization, not the Heritage Foundation. This is UNICEF, right? Saying that the shutdown is going to cause a lot of economic hardship to infants across the world. And the infant mortality rate is going to go up. And this is what aggravates me to no end. Here in Denver, Hancock and the Governor Polis, they never mention any of this. It's about, hey, there's a virus, you might die, you have to do this. And basically, in essence, saying we don't care about people that can't feed their kids. We don't care about businesses that are going out of work or losing their business. We don't care about people that are going to get kicked out of their houses or can't make their rent. We don't care about any of that because there's a virus.
Not to mention increased
absurd.
suicides.
Yes.
All the abuse that's going on in the homes right now.
Right.
Like I have had 2 meltdowns since this thing started, and I'm fairly stable emotionally and mentally. And so when that happened, stop. Don't make me hit you on camera. It wouldn't be the first time. But anyway, I was thinking the second time when I had a meltdown, I thought, what if someone's already in a precarious place mentally?
Yep.
I can see why it would send people over the edge.
Yep.
And I feel really bad for people who are already dealing with some kind of an emotional or mental disability. Then now they're stuck at home and maybe have just lost their job, don't know where their money's coming from. I mean, no wonder suicides have gone skyrocketing, but that's ignored. It's like there's just tunnel vision.
And even if
I
you
know we're
don't-
getting totally off Supreme Court cases now, but I have to say.
But it's government policy, and
It
it
is.
deals with what's constitutional.
Yes.
Because nothing in here says unless there's an emergency. That
right.
is not in here.
It's not in there.
And this isn't the bubonic plague.
No.
I mean, it's bad. It's real. It's serious.
It's
but it doesn't mean we're going to kill people other ways so they don't die this way.
Right.
Which is what they're doing.
Yeah, it's just tunnel vision. I also don't understand. This is the weird thing I'm seeing everywhere now that I didn't see coming either. Is that there's a total split now, right versus left. It's even worse than before because it seems like most people on the right are saying these shutdowns suck. Let's open up right now and go back to work. That this thing's not that bad. And on the left, it's like, stay home, keep your mask on, keep your gloves on. We're all going to die if you don't. And if you're not wearing your mask, you're trying to kill someone and you don't care.
Right.
It's really bizarre. Like, I really don't understand
And the hippies in the 60s were the progressives that were like, damn the man, don't listen to him. And now they're like, you better do what you're told.
I know, it's weird. It's like the side that's supposed to be supposedly for liberty and for like making your own choices is now saying, no, the government, it's like they're all saying, I trust the government to protect me. So I'm going to do everything the government says, and if you're not doing everything the government says, then you don't have any compassion and you want to kill me.
Right.
That is the message I keep getting from them.
So if the government wants to draft you and send you to Vietnam, you better do it because that's the government.
Yeah,
right?
That's not what they used to say. I'm doing an episode pretty soon on this book that I've been reading.
More visual aids.
The next realignment about where the parties are going. I'm trying to get the author on. I don't know. I'm always trying to get people on.
That's good.
But it makes me wonder what's going to happen when this whole thing finally someday eventually goes away. What our parties are going to look like, because it's all of a sudden like the right is all about freedom and the left is all about do what you're told,
I have to
which is bizarre.
Make my quick aside here and I probably said this on another episode also, but right and left, as far as I'm concerned, from my viewpoint, are meaningless distinctions.
Actually, he says that in the book.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
You need to read. If you would read this, we could podcast
You got
about
absolutely.
it together.
That's like we did for Gorsuch's book.
Yeah.
What's important is, do you believe in government authority or individual autonomy? And both the left and the right, on different issues, believe in government authority over the individual. And so what's important as far as I'm concerned is more individual autonomy is always better than more government authority.
Well, you know what? That's what it seems to be coming down to. And again, if you only tuned in for Supreme Court, sorry. But it feels to me like, in whether you want to call it right, left, or whatever, about a half of the country seems to be going the way of, I'm concerned about individual freedom, and I'm going to the right when I say that. And the other half seems to be about community, and if you don't care about community enough to wear a mask, then you're unfeeling and unsympathetic. That it's almost like individual rights versus go along with the good of the community.
On this issue, though, I think there's other issues where it's the opposite.
Yes, I agree.
Right.
But it's a false dichotomy, because even those of us who think we need freedom are not uncaring jerks that don't want the good of everyone. It's just that we're not sold on the idea that this thing is all that terrible. And we're adults that want to make this decision for ourselves. Like, I should be able to make the decision to have people over. Those people should be able to come over and have a good time.
If they want.
And if we all
voluntary.
want to not social distance, that's our choice to not social distance.
Right.
Now, if I go to a store and I know there are other people that are concerned, I will social distance, to not make other people feel afraid or whatever. But if a restaurant wants to open and first of all, what's the difference between a restaurant and a grocery store?
Right.
Sorry, there's not.
No one has to go.
No
if
one
you're
has
scared,
to go.
you don't have to go.
Nobody has to go.
No one wants to make you go.
So
You
why
don't have
is
to
that?
go.
I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. So that's
It's all about control and
It is. It
authority.
feels like it. But it does seem like and I get all this, the feel for these arguments from my Facebook, because I've been looking at some other side opinion sites, and I'm looking at all the comments, and most of them are saying the side that thinks that the stay-at-home orders are great and we should keep them on forever and ever and ever. Their argument seems to be you don't care. If you want everyone to get out there, you're an idiot, you're a knuckle dragger,
Right.
and you don't care. And,
Right, which is what we were talking about. Those people are ignoring the single mother who lives paycheck to paycheck and can't feed her kids. They're ignoring that person. They don't even have the sense to acknowledge that that person exists. Or the kids in other parts of in poor parts of the country that are going to die. They completely ignore that. That's what happens when you have blinders on.
Yep.
That's all you see. And you don't see the horrible stuff going on to your left and your right. And they are the ones that are really the uncaring ones.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
they refuse to see.
I don't understand the emotional investment in it. There's an emotional investment that you see because they get so upset with you when you, advocate for having your liberties back. There's an emotional investment there. Like if they stop being afraid of this thing, I don't know. Like they have no purpose. I just don't. I don't get that.
A lot of people want to be scared and want to be taken care of by the government or their daddy or whoever.
Something.
Whoever
I don't get it. I'm going to try and get a psychologist on as well to try and help me figure this out because I really don't understand it. It's like there's offense and defense. If we want to do the dichotomy again, half of the country wants to sit at home and feel scared and just hunker down and be scared, and the other half is like, no, let's get out there and make a living and open this thing up and live.
And here's the deal: they're not even in contradiction to each other, because if you want to stay home, stay home. If you want to go out, go out. The problem is when one group says no, you have to go out, which nobody's really saying, but there's a group saying no, you can't go out, and we're going to use the government force to prevent you from doing that. That's problematic.
Yeah. So anyway.
All right.
It all had to be said. I was told, I said I wouldn't post any more political stuff on Facebook today, which is Thursday, and I had some friends that are willing to pay me for not doing that, so now I just got the rant out on here, but they don't know that.
Yeah, you'll post this later. Yep.
Anyway.
Thank you, Annette.
Yes, no, thank you for being here, DK. Again, we can find you on...
The podcast is The Law with DK Williams. It's on speakeasyideas.com/thelaw. Check me out on Twitter, where you'll get all the information about new podcasts, at The Law DKW, and on Facebook.com/The Law with DK Williams.
All right.
That gets so monotonous and boring, but that's it. There you go. That's it.
Awesome. And you can find me at AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, yada yada. YouTube. Please go to YouTube /Annette Talks and subscribe. I'd like to get 1 million subscribers. I'm really close. I'm at like 200.
Gotta start.
Help me out there,
Gotta
people.
start.
And I think that's, just comment, if you disagree.
Share.
Disagree, yes. Share, like.
All that.
Disagree if you want to, but engage. I'd love to hear the other side if you've got something to say. And that's about it for today. So thanks for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness.